If you struggle to ask for help, it probably doesn't look dramatic from the outside. You're the capable one, the independent one, the one who figures things out. You'll spend hours researching something instead of asking a simple question. You'll carry stress quietly, rather than say, "I'm overwhelmed." You'll tell people, "It's fine, I've got it," even when you don't. And most of the time, you genuinely believe that's just who you are. But it says more than you think. Because chronic self-reliance is rarely about strength alone. Sometimes it's about safety. On the surface, not asking for help looks like confidence. It looks mature, responsible, even admirable. But look closer at the micro-behaviors. You hesitate before texting someone for support. You rehearse how you'd phrase a request, and then decide it's not worth it. You downplay your needs so they don't feel too much. You feel slightly embarrassed needing something simple. And if someone offers help unexpectedly, you might feel tense, almost exposed. That reaction isn't random. Somewhere along the way, your nervous system learned that vulnerability wasn't neutral. It was risky. For many people, this pattern begins early. Maybe you grew up in a home where adults were overwhelmed. Maybe your parents were loving, but stressed. Maybe emotions were met with silence, irritation, or quick fixes instead of space. So you adapted. You learned that needing less made life smoother. You learned that solving your own problems kept things calm. You learned that being easy made you lovable. That's not weakness, that's protection. Children are incredibly perceptive. They notice when their sadness adds tension, when their questions are brushed aside, when their needs are inconvenient. So they adjust. They become self-sufficient before they're ready. They become the mature one. They become the helper instead of the helped. And over time, that adaptation solidifies into identity. I don't need anyone. I handle things on my own. I'm just independent. But here's where it gets interesting. The real issue often isn't independence. It's control. Asking for help means depending on someone else's response. It means they could disappoint you. They could misunderstand you. They could say no. Or worse, they could make you feel like a burden. If you've ever felt subtly rejected when you needed something, your brain doesn't forget that. So instead of risking that experience again, you control what you can. You control your own solutions. You control your own workload. You control your own emotional processing. It feels safer to carry everything yourself than to risk being let down. And the mind is clever. It reframes this as pride. I just prefer doing it alone. I don't like relying on people. I don't want to bother anyone. But underneath that preference is often an old calculation. Needing equals risk. There's also something else that happens. When you rarely ask for help, you become the strong one in other people's eyes. You're the dependable friend, the calm one, the capable one. And that role can feel strangely comforting. Because if you're the strong one, you don't have to reveal the softer parts. You don't have to admit confusion, or doubt, or exhaustion. Strength becomes a shield. But shields are heavy. You might notice this pattern showing up in subtle ways. You struggle to delegate at work. You avoid talking about personal problems. You minimize your pain with humor. You feel uneasy when someone tries to take care of you. Sometimes you even feel a quiet resentment, like no one notices how much you're carrying. But you've trained everyone not to. When you rarely signal need, people assume there isn't any. And here's the deeper layer. If you learned early that vulnerability felt unsafe, you may also associate worth with usefulness. You feel most secure when you're providing value, when you're competent, when you're needed, but needing others. That feels destabilizing because somewhere in your story, being self-contained kept you emotionally protected. It prevented disappointment. It prevented rejection. It prevented feeling small. So your independence isn't random. It's intelligent. It was built in response to something. That's why telling yourself to just open up more never really addresses the root. The pattern isn't about confidence. It's about emotional memory. Your nervous system remembers what happened the last time you leaned too heavily, even if you don't consciously remember it. And over time, this self-reliance becomes so natural that you don't even notice how automatic it is. You don't ask for help, not because you don't need it, but because your system doesn't expect relief. You expect yourself. There's also a quiet loneliness in this. Not always dramatic, not always obvious. Just a subtle feeling that you're carrying something alone, even when surrounded by people. But you wouldn't call it loneliness. You'd call it independence. And that's the paradox. The very strategy that once protected you can quietly limit how deeply supported you feel. But none of this means something is wrong with you. It means you adapted well. You survived environments where self-containment made sense. You learned to rely on yourself because at some point that was the safest option available. And that pattern followed you into adulthood. It shaped how you relate, how you work, how you love. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. That hesitation before asking for help. That instinct to say, I've got it. That discomfort when someone offers support. It was never random. It was a pattern. And understanding that pattern doesn't make you weaker. It simply makes you aware. If this explains something for you, there's more to uncover. Because sometimes the traits we're most proud of started as protection, and awareness is where the deeper story begins.